Finding light in the shadows. My journey through a fading marriage and back to myself. It was a quiet night in our home, one that might seem peaceful from the outside. But standing alone in the dim light of the kitchen, looking at the empty plates and scattered toys, I felt anything but peace. The echoes of laughter and warmth that once filled these walls were now replaced by silence and resentment. I looked around, catching a glimpse of our family photo on the fridge, our wedding day. The spark in his eyes as he held my hand, the happiness we had once believed would last forever. But somewhere along the line, that light had faded, and all that remained was the shadow of a love that felt more like an obligation than a bond. How did we get here? I still remember the early days when even the simplest gestures felt like promises of something eternal. He'd reach across a crowded room, just to brush his hand against mine, and in those moments, I felt seen, cherished, and understood. It was like we were living in a world all our own. A place untouched by the demands of life and the weariness that would one day cloud his gaze. But time has a way of wearing down even the strongest foundations. And ours was no exception. The birth of our children brought us immense joy. But it also brought responsibility, stress, and an unspoken shift in priorities. I watched as he poured all his love into our kids. And while I loved him more for it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slowly becoming an afterthought. A relic of a past he no longer valued. Our conversations, once filled with dreams and playful banter, became cold, reduced to logistical exchanges about bills, school schedules, and household chores. He was present, but only in the physical sense. Emotionally, he was somewhere far away, lost in his own frustrations. I tried reaching out, making little gestures that once would have brought us closer. But each time, I was met with indifference or a sharp word that stung more than I cared to admit. I remember one evening, the kids were particularly rowdy, refusing to settle down for bed. I had spent what felt like hours coaxing them, and by the time I entered the kitchen, exhausted, he was standing there, arms crossed, with a look of sheer frustration. "Can't you ever keep things under control?" he muttered, his tone icy. And in that moment, I felt a pang of loneliness that words couldn't describe. It wasn't just the comment, it was what it represented. The loss of partnership, of kindness, of that invisible thread that once connected us. Over time, his moods became the weather of our household, unpredictable and often stormy. The man who had once made me feel safe now made me feel like a burden. Someone who could never quite measure up. His frustration simmered just below the surface, erupting over trivial things. Once, after I forgot to put leftovers in the fridge, he looked at me with such disappointment, like I was the cause of all his discontent. I began to question myself, wondering if I was, in fact, lazy or forgetful, as he so often implied. The weight of his criticism became a burden I carried silently, trying to be better, do more, all while losing pieces of myself in the process. And then, there was the moment that changed everything. Our youngest daughter, Mia, only 7, accidentally knocked over a glass of water while setting the table. The sound of shattering glass seemed to echo through the tense air. And before I could even react, he stormed into the room, his face twisted in anger. "Can't you kids do anything right?" he snapped. And I saw Mia's face fall, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. I rushed to her side, feeling the sting of his words not just for myself but for our children, who were beginning to feel the weight of his discontent just as deeply as I was. That night, as I tucked Mia into bed and held her close, I knew that something had to change, not just for me, but for them. I tried talking to him, explaining how much I missed the man he used to be, how much I longed for the warmth and affection that had once been the foundation of our life together. "We could have a perfect life," I whispered, feeling vulnerable and hopeful all at once. "Just be happy. Enjoy us, that's all I want." But he shook his head, dismissing my words as if they were a nuisance, a demand too heavy to bear. "It's not that simple," he said, and I realized then that he didn't see the solution the way I did. He believed that intimacy was a cure-all, that if I just gave him what he wanted, everything else would fall into place. But I couldn't do that, not without feeling loved and valued in return. I suggested marriage counseling, hoping that maybe a professional could help us bridge the gap that felt insurmountable. He agreed, reluctantly, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. But after just a few sessions, he dismissed the counselor's advice, saying it was a waste of time and money. I was left to go alone, sitting in that office week after week, pouring out my heart to a stranger because the one person who was supposed to care had turned away. Those sessions became a lifeline, a place where I could finally speak without fear of judgment, where I could express the loneliness, the sadness, and the overwhelming sense of being unpartnered in what was supposed to be a partnership. Through counseling, I began to see how my own patterns had contributed to our dynamic. I had always been a people pleaser, willing to absorb his frustrations and criticisms without question, believing that this was resilience, that this was love, but I was beginning to understand that love isn't supposed to hurt. And resilience isn't the same as self-sacrifice. I started setting boundaries, small at first, but enough to begin reclaiming parts of myself that I had lost along the way. As I grew stronger, I found the courage to stand up to him, not with anger, but with a quiet determination. I told him that I wouldn't allow his negativity to affect our children, that I would no longer be a silent witness to their pain. He looked at me, perhaps expecting the old me to back down, but I held firm, knowing that I was finally fighting for something worth protecting, my own well-being, and the happiness of our children. The journey from that moment has been anything but easy. There were days when I questioned myself, wondering if I was making the right choice, if I was tearing our family apart. But each time I looked at my children, saw the way their laughter returned, I knew that I was doing the right thing. Whether our path leads to reconciliation or separation, I am committed to creating a life that is filled with love, respect, and kindness. A life where I am no longer defined by someone else's discontent. In the end, I have come to realize that love, real love, is a choice we make every day. It's in the small acts of kindness, the words unspoken, the sacrifices made not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. I once believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle, but I now understand that love must be nurtured, that it must be mutual, and that it cannot thrive in an environment of constant criticism and neglect. This journey has taught me the importance of self-worth, the strength that comes from setting boundaries, and the courage it takes to demand a life that is rich with joy and connection. I no longer look to him to define my happiness. Instead, I am finding it within myself, and in the moments I share with my children, in the laughter that once again fills our home, and whether or not he chooses to walk this path with us. I know that I am finally on a journey that feels true to who I am and who I want to be. In love but unfulfilled, the silent struggles behind closed doors. As the story opens, we are introduced to a woman who, after a few failed relationships and years of searching, meets a man who seems to embody everything she's been looking for. He is kind, thoughtful, and treats her with a respect that she's rarely encountered before. Their relationship begins with simplicity and shared laughter, a comforting warmth that gives her hope for something lasting. It feels like a reprieve from her previous relationships, which often left her questioning her self-worth. This new relationship promises stability, kindness, and a level of companionship that she finds grounding. Despite the differences in their backgrounds, she has never been particularly religious. While he holds strong Catholic beliefs, they both value honesty and integrity. And these values become the bedrock of their connection. Over time, their bond grows, but it isn't long before she begins to sense something missing. She can't quite put her finger on it, but she feels a void, a subtle distance that lingers between them despite the closeness they share. She begins to wonder if perhaps they are not as compatible as she had initially thought. One night, during a heartfelt conversation, she brings up the topic of intimacy. She tries to express her desire for more than just emotional connection. She yearns for a spark, a passion that makes her feel desired and wanted. Her husband listens patiently, his face thoughtful yet somewhat closed off, as if the conversation makes him uncomfortable. He admits that he has struggled with intimacy, largely due to his conservative upbringing and religious beliefs. He explains that he views physical intimacy as something sacred, meant to be shared sparingly and with reverence. While she respects his perspective, she feels a pang of disappointment. She wonders if, perhaps, he lacks the passion she hoped would grow between them. She reassures him that she isn't looking for perfection or excitement at every turn, but she wants to feel desired in a way that goes beyond gestures and words. His response is sincere but guarded. He asks for her patience and expresses hope that, with time, they will build the kind of intimacy she desires. The gap between them becomes more evident over time. On their first wedding anniversary, she plans a romantic evening, imagining that they might finally break free from the script that has defined their intimate life. She carefully prepares everything: the restaurant, the ambiance, even a heartfelt letter expressing her love and her hope for a deeper connection. As the evening unfolds, she can't shake the feeling that something is missing. Her husband is polite and attentive, yet he seems distracted, as if he's more focused on making everything appear perfect rather than genuinely connecting with her. When they return home, she senses his reluctance, an unspoken hesitancy that keeps him from letting go. She is left feeling alone, despite being with the person she loves most. This experience lingers in her mind, feeding a growing fear that their relationship may lack the passion she craves. As weeks turn into months, her husband's hesitation starts to take a toll on her self-esteem. She begins to question if she is somehow inadequate, if there is something about her that makes it hard for him to express desire. One day, during a moment of vulnerability, she brings up these feelings, hoping that they can address the tension together. Her husband listens, but his response is defensive. He reminds her of her initial rejection, saying that it had wounded him deeply, making him cautious about opening up. His words cut her to the core. She realizes that he is carrying an unhealed wound from their early relationship, and this unresolved hurt has become a barrier to intimacy. Although she understands his perspective, she feels trapped by a cycle of emotional distance and unmet needs. She tries to be patient, reminding herself of his kindness and the love he shows in other ways. But a lingering feeling of betrayal, by unmet expectations, not infidelity, makes her wonder if love alone can sustain a relationship that lacks physical connection. Feeling increasingly isolated, she begins to consider her options. Should she settle for the emotional comfort he provides, even if it means sacrificing her need for physical connection? Or should she seek fulfillment elsewhere, knowing that doing so would mean ending a relationship built on trust and companionship? In her search for answers, she turns to friends who have experienced similar challenges. One friend shares a story about her own marriage, in which she and her husband faced a similar struggle. They eventually sought the help of a therapist, who guided them through exercises designed to rebuild intimacy and address the emotional wounds that had hindered their connection. Another friend suggests that she might benefit from reading about love languages and understanding how people express affection in different ways. Inspired by these conversations, she suggests they attend couples counseling. At first, her husband is hesitant, viewing therapy as unnecessary, but after several discussions, he agrees to give it a try. In therapy, they begin to unravel the complexities of their relationship, exploring the factors that have contributed to their current struggles. During one session, the therapist asks her husband to express what he feels when she shares her need for intimacy. He admits that her desire makes him feel inadequate, as if he is failing her in some fundamental way. This admission opens a door to deeper understanding, allowing them to address the fear and shame that have kept them from connecting fully. As they continue therapy, they learn techniques for fostering intimacy without pressure, allowing each to express affection in ways that feel natural. With time, they begin to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of trust and understanding. They start small, creating rituals of closeness that don't involve physical intimacy at first, holding hands during a walk, sharing a quiet moment before bed, or expressing appreciation through words and actions. These gestures, though simple, become meaningful ways of reinforcing their bond. She feels a renewed sense of hope, seeing her husband make an effort to bridge the gap between them. One night, after several months of therapy, they experience a breakthrough. For the first time, he is able to let go of his reservations and embrace her with genuine affection. This moment, though not perfect, represents a significant step toward the connection they have both longed for. She realizes that while their journey may not look like the passionate love stories she once imagined, it holds a depth and resilience that she has come to value. In reflecting on their journey, she gains a new perspective on love and fulfillment. She learns that relationships are not always defined by passion alone. Sometimes, they require a willingness to confront difficult truths and a commitment to growth. Even when it feels uncomfortable, she understands that while love can be a powerful foundation, it is only through honesty, vulnerability, and mutual effort that a relationship can truly flourish. For viewers, this story offers a powerful reminder Love alone may not be enough to sustain a relationship. But love combined with open communication, patience, and a shared commitment to growth can create a bond that withstands even the most challenging obstacles. This lesson encourages us all to look deeper into our relationships and to recognize that true connection requires more than just affection. It demands a willingness to confront our fears, heal past wounds, and continually strive for understanding. The Choice That Shattered Us, a story of love, loss, and finding redemption. The story opens with Mark reflecting on the humdrum routine of his daily life. His marriage to Ellie feels stable but unexciting, with small moments of missed connections growing over time. Mark works as a project manager, bogged down by the lack of enthusiasm in his career. Ellie, on the other hand, finds joy and purpose in her boutique, pouring her energy into building something meaningful. Here, we explore the nuances of Mark's internal dissatisfaction, his inability to express his feelings, and his desire to escape, even briefly, from the predictability of his life. One evening, Mark agrees to grab a drink with his colleague, Dan. It's just another casual night out, or so it seems. But at the bar, Mark notices Mara, a confident woman with an aura of intrigue. As they begin talking, he finds himself pulled into an unexpectedly deep conversation. They talk about travel, their thoughts on happiness, and moments that truly make life feel worthwhile. In these exchanges, he feels a spark he hasn't experienced in years, a momentary connection that feels like a lifeline. Before he knows it, one conversation leads to an impulsive decision, and they spend the night together. Mark is torn, feeling both a renewed sense of excitement and an overwhelming sense of guilt. In the weeks following, Mark tries to bury the memory and move on, but fate intervenes when Ellie befriends Mara, who has just moved to town. The two women form a bond, and Mark is forced into a web of secrecy and silent dread. To make matters worse, Mara reveals she is pregnant. Mark is thrown into a spiral of confusion and fear, realizing the impact of his decisions. Ellie, meanwhile, is blissfully unaware and is thrilled by her new friendship, inviting Mara into their lives and unknowingly adding tension to every encounter. Eventually, the guilt becomes too much, and Mark decides to tell Ellie the truth. The confession is excruciating, with Ellie's hurt and disbelief evident in every word she says. Mark watches the trust they had crumble in an instant, replaced by a palpable distance between them. Ellie demands that Mark persuade Mara to end the pregnancy, but Mara stands her ground, asserting her right to choose. The dilemma intensifies as Mark realizes the implications of his actions have only just begun to unfold. Over the next months, Ellie and Mark attempt to repair the damage. They attend therapy, discuss their issues, and try to rebuild what's left of their marriage. Mark also begins his own journey of introspection, examining the dissatisfaction that led him to make such a reckless choice. Through these sessions, he learns to confront his fears, his failures, and the deeper reasons behind his discontent. Ellie, too, struggles with forgiving him, torn between her love for him and the betrayal that has shaken her trust. As Mark reflects on his mistakes, Ellie finds strength in her independence. She channels her pain into her boutique, expanding it with a new online platform. Her career becomes a source of pride and accomplishment, and she gains recognition in her community. Through her growth, Ellie finds resilience and begins to rebuild a life for herself outside of her relationship with Mark. This phase illustrates her empowerment and resilience, showing that while some choices can shatter trust, they can also pave the way for new beginnings. As time passes, Mark tries to be a responsible father, teaching his son about integrity and respect through his actions. He realizes that the most valuable lessons in life often come from mistakes, and he vows to live with greater honesty and purpose. His journey of self-reflection includes reading about trust, developing healthy relationships, and learning about responsibility. He understands the fragility of trust and the importance of integrity, not just in romantic relationships but in all areas of life. In the end, both Mark and Ellie emerge stronger. Though separately, Ellie, having built a new life, focuses on her career and personal growth. Mark continues to strive for redemption, committed to being a better man and a role model for his son. He looks back on his choices, accepting that while he can't change the past, he can live each day with honesty and integrity. The story concludes with Mark's resolve to approach every relationship with openness and respect. recognizing that true love and commitment require daily effort and care. Betrayal, survival, and redemption. The surgeon's journey through heartache and healing. In the silent halls of St. Michael's Hospital, where every ticking second could mean the difference between life and death, Dr. Mary Harper saved lives daily. But no one, not even her, could have predicted how the very life she held dear was slipping from her grasp. Dr. Mary Harper had built a life around saving others. Her commitment to the hospital, her patience, and her marriage seemed unwavering. But it was in these very walls that her own life would unravel in a way no surgery could fix. Married to John, a man she had once believed was her soulmate, her life seemed fulfilled, if not perfect. Yet, unknown to her, cracks had begun to form in their relationship. One evening, a single text message shattered everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and trust. The photo, a candid shot of John with a stranger in a cozy, intimate setting, left Mary stunned. She was a doctor, skilled at noticing every minor detail. But nothing had prepared her for the betrayal that stared back at her. Suddenly, the long nights, distant looks, and whispered phone calls all made sense. Driven by an emotional storm, she confronted John at a hotel only to be met with cold indifference. Humiliated and broken, she left in a daze, her mind swirling with unanswered questions and heart-wrenching scenarios. In her confused state, a tragic car accident left her in a coma for 6 long months. While in a coma, John and his mistress lived openly, using Mary's hard-earned savings for a life of luxury, all while she lay helpless. When she finally awoke, her recovery was punctuated by the slow, agonizing discovery of the betrayal's full extent. Financial ruin and personal devastation would have crushed anyone else. But Mary used this as fuel to find resilience within herself. Her comeback began subtly. She took time to rebuild, quietly hiring investigators, regaining control of her finances, and plotting the unraveling of John's newfound comfort. In her own clever way, Mary orchestrated John's decline by creating humiliating scenarios in which he was forced to work menial jobs, subtly observing his life fall apart. Yet, with every blow John received, Mary's emotions became more conflicted. She found herself observing his humanity, his exhaustion, his apparent commitment to a family he seemed determined to keep together. But betrayal has a way of circling back. Just as John began to settle into a semblance of stability, Lily, the woman he betrayed Mary for, grew weary of his dwindling prospects. Soon, she found solace in the company of another, a doctor who promised her a different kind of life. This discovery brought Mary face to face with her own capacity for forgiveness and vengeance. In a final, unexpected turn, she decided to reveal Lily's betrayal to John, not to hurt him further but to show him the consequences of his own choices. John, now left a single father and burdened with financial and emotional ruin, became a shadow of his former self. Mary watched from a distance, no longer angry but reflective, understanding that the real victory was in her own growth, her newfound strength, and her ability to heal. Her story reminds us that betrayal can shatter us, but it's in the rebuilding that we find our truest selves.